Youth Legislator Seddon, we are ready to begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you for being here and welcome to this meeting of the Nevada Youth Legislature. My name is Youth Legislator Joseph Seddon, and I will be acting as chair for this meeting. Before we get started, I'd like to ask the secretary to please call roll.
Youth Legislator Bentham.
Here.
Youth Legislator Buttnogger.
Present.
Youth Legislator Boulware. Youth Legislator Craver, absent. Youth Legislator Greenstein.
Present.
Youth Legislator Keene.
Present.
Youth Legislator Kington, absent. Youth Legislator Krieger, absent. Youth Legislator Lara.
Present.
Youth Legislator Macababid.
Present.
Youth Legislator Miller.
Present.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Present.
Youth Legislator Rogest. Youth Legislator Sutton.
Present.
Youth Legislator Thornton.
Present.
Youth Legislator Thurgood. Youth Legislator Walker.
Present.
Youth Legislator Wong. Vice Chair Lyle absent and Chair Dimison absent.
Thank you, Ms. Aguayo. Now I'd like to cover some housekeeping reminders for the youth legislators and anyone providing testimony. Please remember to turn the microphone on and identify yourself for the record each time you speak. Turn the microphone off when you are done speaking. I would also like to ask everyone to please turn off your cell phones or other electronic devices. And please note that this meeting is being recorded and uploaded to the legislative website. Keep in mind as we discuss the business of the Nevada Youth Legislature. For members of the public attending in person, please sign in at the table near the entrance at each location. Please sign in even if you do not plan to provide public comment. Finally, all materials received prior to the meeting have been uploaded to the NYL's meeting page. Our next agenda item is public comment. Public comment may be provided in several different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. At this time, if anyone would like to provide public comment, please remember to identify yourself for the record. To ensure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, I would like to ask anyone speaking during public comment to keep their comments to no more than 3 minutes and to try to avoid repeating comments that have been made by a previous speaker. Remember that there will be another period for public comment at the end of this meeting. Is there anyone wishing to testify in Las Vegas? Doesn't look like it. Is there anyone wishing to testify in Carson City? Doesn't look like that here either. BPS, is there anyone on the line to make public comment?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. It appears we do not have anyone who is prepared to provide public comment at this time, so we will move on to the next portion of this meeting. Before we get into the discussion about the bill draft request, we need to address Agenda Item 3, which is approval of the minutes from the meetings on October 20th, 2022 and November 15th, 2022. Copies of the meeting minutes have been provided to you. I will now accept a motion to approve the minutes for both meetings. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the minutes from the last two meetings.
Thank you. Youth Legislator Moss has approved for approval of the minutes of our meetings held on October 20th and November 15th. Is there a second to the motion?
Mr. Chair, I second that motion.
Thank you, Youth Legislator Thornton. Youth Legislator Thornton has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion or regarding the minutes? Doesn't appear so, so I'll take a vote on the motion now. All those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes, please signify by saying yes.
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 All those opposed, please signify by saying no. The motion carries unanimously, and the minutes are approved. We will now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the discussion of our bill draft request, BDR 34-549. The bill draft, which has been provided to each of you, was prepared by the Legal Division of the LCB. Asher Killian and David Noss from the Legal Division are here to help us with the discussion and answer any questions. Mr. Killian, would you please give us a brief summary of what is included in the bill draft?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Asher Killian, Chief Deputy Legislative Counsel. So I'm going to walk you through the BDR document that you all received. As I go through it, I'm going to kind of explain some of the various components of the BDR as well. They roughly correspond to what appears in the ultimate bill, but because this might be the first time you've been looking at a BDR as opposed to a bill, I want to make sure you understand each of the components on the page as well. So starting from the very top of the page, you'll see there's a note that the BDR includes an unfunded mandate in Section 8 that was not requested by the affected local government. Our office is required by law to include a flag like this anytime that there's any provision of a bill that could require a local government to spend money, and there's not a provision in the bill that explicitly funds that expenditure of money. And we're also required to flag whether it was requested by a local government or was not requested by an affected local government. In this case, since school districts are obviously going to be engaging in some activities to carry out these return to play and return to learn policies, including updating their policies, creating concussion management teams and the like, there's a possible cost for school districts. So that's why this BDR, we're required to include this flag on this BDR. And the next provision you'll see is the summary. As you'll note, this is a little shorter than the summaries of the BDRs that we provide when you're considering BDR proposals within the youth legislature. The requirement on us there is that our office has to publish a BDR list, which includes all BDRs that have been requested with our office, along with a brief summary, which is usually one clause or one sentence, to help identify that bill as opposed to the hundreds of other bills that the legislature receives each session. This summary is usually printed on the agenda of any committee that will hear this bill in the future. And as you can see, the summary is that it revises provisions relating to the prevention and treatment of injuries to the head, which is just a single clause that captures the general content of the entirety of the bill. The next provision you'll see on that first page are the fiscal note provisions on both local government and the state. You'll note that the local government fiscal note is may have fiscal impact and the effect on the state is yes. I will clarify that this does not necessarily mean that this bill will cost money. Our office is required, as we're drafting, to basically exercise our best judgment on whether we think there's any provision in the bill that could either cause a reduction of revenue and expenditure of funds by the state that exceeds $2,000, or whether it could cause a reduction in revenue or an expenditure of any number of dollars by any local government in the state. This doesn't mean that it absolutely will cost money or that there's any certain amount of money that it will cost. Instead, this is what flags the bill to have our fiscal division then send out requests to the affected state agencies and local governments for them to then tell us whether they believe it will cost any money or not. All of those requests come back and they're compiled by the fiscal division as the actual fiscal note that accompanies the bill. And it's at that point that the legislature is able to determine whether it actually costs any money or not. The following provision on the page is the title. In Nevada, the Constitution requires every bill embrace but a single subject. As you'll see, that first clause, an act relating to public safety, that is the single subject of this bill. All the clauses that follow describe each of the various sections of the bill and the contents of those sections, and all of those sections relate back to that single subject of public safety. Following the title, you'll see the Legislative Council's Digest. This is a explanation of the contents of the bill that's prepared by our office. We're required by law to explain how the provisions of the bill interact with existing law and existing regulations if relevant, and to try to explain the bill in the context of existing law in plain language as understandably as possible, despite the fact that obviously we're writing laws and a little bit of legal language has a tendency to sneak in. As you scroll through that, you'll see that there is a discussion of the existing law relating to head injuries for pupils and youths. And then you'll see several bolded section number references. Each section of the bill is discussed in turn in terms of what it does within the context of the bill. And then after that third page where the digest ends, you'll see a double dashed line. That's always the indication of when the substantive part of the bill starts. Following that is the enacting clause. The Nevada Constitution requires all laws enacted by the Nevada Legislature to contain exactly this clause. And then following the enacting clause, you see the various sections of the bill. Starting with Section 1, this is transitory language that states that an existing chapter of NRS, Chapter 385B, which is the chapter dealing with the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association, is being amended to add several new sections. The sections that follow, sections 2 through 6, you'll see that those are in blue, italicized, and bolded language. That is what's used in BDRs and in bills in Nevada to indicate that new language is being added to NRS. This first new section, Section 2, is a definition of the term provider of healthcare. This term is defined in several places in NRS in a manner that's consistent with this definition. The way that this definition differs is that in addition to the other usual providers of healthcare, it also includes an athletic trainer who is licensed pursuant to Chapter 640B of NRS, which is the chapter for the licensing of athletic trainers, because athletic trainers are another kind of provider of healthcare that is particularly useful in the context of the return to play and return to learn policies. Sections 3 through 6 of the BDR are the sections that specify the requirements of the return to learn and return to play policies that are being created by this bill. Section 3 requires pupils to be evaluated if practicable before they begin to engage in interscholastic activities or events. It specifies the kinds of evidence-based tests that are required to be used as part of such an evaluation. Section 4 details the requirements of the policy for what happens after a pupil either sustains or is suspected of having sustained an injury to the head while participating in an interscholastic activity or event. It requires the removal of the pupil from the activity or event, the notification of the parent or legal guardian of the pupil, and then the provision of the parent or legal guardian of the pupil with the brochure to be discussed later, the procedure for return to play or return to learn, the contact information for the concussion management team, and then the form to actually return to play or return to learn, all of which are going to be discussed in the next couple sections. Section 5 is the section that establishes the requirements for the policy concerning the steps that the pupil has to go through before they return to play or return to learn. It requires an initial evaluation at least 24 hours after the injury is sustained or suspected to have been sustained. It requires a provider of healthcare or a school nurse who's been trained in the evaluation of head injuries to perform the evaluation at least once each day. And then it details what the contents of the evaluation would be, and requires the consultation by the provider of healthcare or school nurse with other members of the concussion management team for the pupil to determine whether the pupil should proceed to the next step of the protocol, remain at the current step, or return to the previous step. It also requires a written record to be maintained of each of these evaluations. It prohibits steps from being skipped, and it prohibits steps from being a pupil from being advanced on steps if the provider of healthcare or school nurse believes it would be unsafe for the pupil to advance. And then finally, in subsection 9 of this section, a form is required to be created to allow a pupil to finally return to play or return to learn, certifying that the pupil has completed the protocol and authorizing their full participation in coursework or in some other physically demanding interscholastic activity or event. Section 6 is the section of new language that details the actual steps in the protocol for return to learn and return to play. Subsection 1 is the subsection that details the steps for return to learn. And then subsection 2 is the subsection that details the steps in the protocol for return to play. Section 7 of the bill is a section that amends a section of existing law, NRS 385B 080. That's the section that has the current return to play policy in law. This section is amended in various ways. You'll see, just off the top, you'll see language in red with brackets and strike through. That's how it's indicated that language in NRS is to be deleted in a BDR and in a bill. You'll see text that's in regular black type. That's text that is existing law. And then again, you'll see text in blue italicized bold, and that's language that's going to be added to NRS. The amendments by this section require the NIAA to adopt regulations that are consistent with the requirements in sections 3 to 6 inclusive of this act, which are the sections we just went through detailing the new return to play and return to learn protocols. It also requires the NIAA to create a brochure concerning the prevention and treatment of injuries to the head, which includes certain additional information that would be provided to a pupil who has either sustained or is suspected to have sustained an injury to the head. Subsection 2 is now the provision that details the contents of this brochure, so this additional information that's required to be provided to such a pupil. The contents include information about injuries to the head, procedures to be followed after an injury to the head, symptoms that a pupil who has sustained an injury to the head is likely to exhibit, recommended care and accommodations for a pupil who has sustained an injury to the head, and then a place for filling in the contact information for all of the relevant personnel, the concussion management team, providers of emergency medical services, and nearby hospitals. So subsection 3 is a section of existing law that requires the pupil and his or her parent or guardian to be provided with a copy of the return to play policy and to sign a statement before the pupil participates in an interscholastic activity or event and on an annual basis thereafter. This is being amended to refer to this newly updated policy. Additionally, the statement that's required to be signed is being updated to include certain additional relevant information, namely that the pupil and their parent understand that injuries to the head may occur, that they understand the risks associated with participating in an activity or event, that they understand the risks associated with continuing to participate in an activity or event after a head injury has been sustained, that they agree to follow the policy, and that they understand that the policy and brochure are available both on the NIAA's website and on either the school district, charter school, university school, or private school's website in which the pupil is enrolled. Subsection 4 requires the NIAA to actually post that policy and brochure on their website. Subsection 5 requires the NIAA to review that policy and brochure at least once every 5 years and make any necessary updates. Subsection 6 authorizes the NIAA to adopt regulations that prescribe requirements for the policy which are different than the provisions required by law. If the NIAA receives testimony from experts in the field of head injuries that the alternative contents better reflect current best practices, and the NIAA concludes on the basis of that testimony that the alternative contents would be more effective at preventing and treating injuries to the head than the contents required by law. Effectively, what this subsection does is allows the NIAA to consider the current science, current medical practice, and update the policy accordingly without needing to necessarily come back to the legislature for a bill to amend the law to reflect the current best practice. Section 8 of the bill amends NRS 392-452, which is a section dealing with public schools. It was the companion section for the return to play policy in NRS 385B-080. This section generally makes amendments that are consistent with Section 7, but just applies them to public schools rather than the NIAA. Notably, the public schools are required to give their version of the policy and brochure to athletes before participating in competitive sports and once a year thereafter. That's in the new subsection 2. They are additionally required to provide this information to any pupil enrolled in the public school once they are notified that the pupil has sustained or is suspected of having sustained an injury to the head, and that's what's in subsection 3. Subsection 4 requires the public schools to post their policy and brochure on their internet websites. Subsection 5 is the section that requires the creation of a concussion management team at each public school, and it details the personnel that have to serve on the concussion management team. Subsection 6 requires the concussion management team to perform the duties prescribed in the return to play and return to learn policies. Subsection 7 requires the public schools to review their policies and brochures at least once every 5 years and make necessary updates. And then subsection 8 requires administrators, teachers, counselors, and other employees of public schools who are likely to encounter a pupil that's sustained or is suspected of having sustained an injury to the head to complete annually certain training relating to the prevention and treatment of injuries to the head. And each public school is required to maintain a record of the completion of that training. Section 9 of this BDR enacts analogous provisions for private schools to the provisions that are required for public schools in Section 8. The provisions here are generally similar. The one difference that I'll note is down in subsection 9. There's an existing provision of law in NRS 394-610 that makes it a gross misdemeanor for any private school or employee of a private school to fail to comply with any provision of law relating to private schools. Subsection 9 makes it only a misdemeanor rather than a gross misdemeanor for a person to willfully violate the provisions of law for private schools relating to return to play or return to learn. Finally, Section 10 of the bill. This is amending NRS 455A-200, which is the section for organizations for youth sports. The amendments in this section are a little less comprehensive than the amendments for public and private schools because organizations for youth sports don't have the same structure that public schools and private schools have. They do not require the creation of a concussion management team for an organization for youth sports. And the reason for that is that any affected youth would instead report their injury to the public school or private school that they're enrolled in, and then that public school or private school would use its concussion management team and provide services to that pupil normally. The provisions for an organization for youth sports do still require them to adopt a policy that's consistent with the NIAA's policy, which includes notification to a parent when a youth sustains an injury to the head while participating in youth sports. And then subsection 3, again, requires the organization for youth sports to post the policy on their internet website. And subsection 4 requires them to review their policy and update it at least once every 5 years. The final provisions that you see, Section 11 and Section 12. Section 11, there's a requirement in state law that anytime that there's a bill that imposes expenses on a local government, certain additional factors have to apply. This section is simply providing that the requirements of that section do not apply to this bill and to the additional expenses of local government that are related to return to play or return to learn policies. Section 12 is the effective date. The bill in general, if you'll note in subsection 2 there, sections 1 to 11 of inclusive of this act become effective. It becomes effective on passage and approval for adopting regulations or performing any sort of administrative actions that are necessary to carry the bill out, and then it becomes effective on July 1st, 2024 for all other purposes. So basically, these requirements come into play fully on July 1st, 2024, but this section allows all of the relevant entities to begin all of the planning, regulations, and other preparation they need to do to carry it out from the day that the bill is enacted. So that's the entirety of the contents of the BDR. At this point, if there are any questions, we'd be happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Killian, for that explanation. Does anyone have questions for Mr. Killian or any comments they'd like to make regarding the bill draft? If so, please state your name for the record. Before entertaining a motion on the bill draft, does any youth legislator have any remaining questions or comments they would like to make? If there are no further questions, I will now entertain a motion to approve the bill draft. Would someone like to make a motion?
Youth Legislator Thornton, for the record, I would like to make a motion to approve the bill draft for the 2023 legislative session.
Youth Legislator Thornton has moved to accept the bill draft as presented. Is there a second to the motion?
Mr. Chair, I second.
Youth Legislator Moss has seconded the motion. Do the members wish to have any discussion concerning the motion? I'll take a vote on the motion now. When the secretary calls your name, please state yes if you agree to accept the bill draft as presented, or no if you do not agree to the bill draft. Ms. Aguayo, would you please take a roll call vote?
Youth Legislator Bentham,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Buttnager,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Bulware,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Craver absent, Youth Legislator Greenstein,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Keene,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Kington absent, Youth Legislator Krieger absent, Youth Legislator Lara,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Macababid,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Miller,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Moss,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Rogest, Youth Legislator Sutton,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Thornton,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Walker,
Yes.
and I'm sorry, I skipped Youth Legislator Thurgood,
Yes.
Youth Legislator Wong,
Yes.
and Vice Chair and Chair are absent.
The motion carries and the bill draft will be accepted. I look forward to when our bill is heard during the 2023 legislative session and look forward to having the opportunity to testify. Are there any other comments?
Youth Legislator Thornton, for the record, I'd like to make a comment, Chair.
Go ahead, Youth Legislator Thornton.
Thank you. Like I said, Youth Legislator Thornton, for the record, I would just like to thank all of the youth legislators for all of the effort that we've all put into our bill ideas, and then I'd like to thank you all for helping approve this bill. I'd also like to thank the legal counsel for working on this bill and for all their effort towards the amendments and what we've already talked about. So thank you all. I yield my time, Chair.
Thank you, Youth Legislator Thornton. I know we are all very proud of the bill we have produced. Next is Agenda Item 5, which is the selection of a member of the Nevada Youth Legislature to consult with the Nevada Association of Student Councils concerning the nomination of a student member to the State Board of Education. One member appointed to the Nevada State Board of Education is a student enrolled in a public school in Nevada. Although the student member cannot vote, the student attends meetings of the State Board of Education and has the opportunity to participate in and ask questions at these meetings. At its meetings, the State Board of Education makes various decisions about education policy in Nevada. It selects textbooks, creates the standards for state testing programs, determines courses of study, and makes other rules related to education. Therefore, the student member will have an opportunity to present the student perspective to the board during its deliberations. The law requires this student member to be nominated by the Nevada Association of Student Councils in consultation with the Nevada Youth Legislature. The selection of the student member of the state board won't occur until March, so at this point, we do not yet have any information on the students who will be considered for the nomination. Additionally, since this is our last meeting, we will not meet again before the selection of the nominee. Therefore, it was suggested that we appoint a member to attend that NASC meeting and consult with the NASC on our behalf, either in person or remotely. The NASC board meeting will probably be in March 2023. Would anyone like to volunteer to attend the meeting of the NASC and consult with the NASC regarding the nomination of a student to serve on the State Board of Education?
Mr. Chairman, I seek recognition.
Youth Legislator Dylan Moss, for the record.
I would like to nominate myself for this position as the consultant to the Nevada Association of Student Councils.
Okay. Would anyone else like to nominate themselves or another person for this position?
Youth Legislator Thurgood, I actually have a question. One of the rules is that you have to be a public school, if you have to attend a public school. Is that for this as well?
I believe so, yes.
The consultant from the NYL does not have to attend a public school.
Okay.
That's for the student member of the Board of Education.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I would like to nominate myself, please, Youth Legislator Thurgood.
Okay, thank you, Youth Legislator Thurgood. Is there anyone else?
I would like to nominate myself as well.
Who is this? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. This is Legislator Makababad.
Thank you, Youth Legislator Makababad. Are there any more volunteers? So it doesn't look like anyone else. So since we have more than one volunteer, let's take a vote on who should be appointed to represent the Youth Legislature at the NASC meeting. Before taking the vote, do any of the candidates have any comments they would like to make?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add some comments.
Go ahead, Youth Legislator Moss.
I just want to address the legislature, or the NYL, just to kind of speak to you as to why I'm qualified to be the consultant. As a student body president in my day-to-day life, I work with NESC and their board on the daily. I work with the Western Region representative. I email back and forth with the state NESC president. So I have a working relationship already with NESC. And I just want to say that I feel I've proven myself as a dutiful worker to this legislature as being in the leadership team last year. Chairman, I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Youth Legislator Moss. Do any of the other candidates have any comments, or would they like to say anything?
I also would like to add a comment.
Go ahead, Youth Legislator
for the
Thurgood.
record. I would like to add that as someone who's on the member of my school student council, that I also have a working relationship with NASC. I also I'm a part of the college program, so my classes in and of themselves I've shown to move forward and try to better my academic standing. I've also consistently gone to leadership-based schools since I was 11, and I would like the opportunity to speak on behalf of this board in a position that would affect all of us and matters. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Youth Legislator Thurgood. Youth Legislator Makababad, would you like to make any comments?
No, I would not like to. I just wanted to try this opportunity, but it seems like the other two youth legislators are more qualified as they are in working with the NASC.
Thank you, Youth Legislator Makababad. Ms. Aguayo, please take the vote.
Youth Legislator Bentham.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Buttenauger.
Youth Legislator Moss, please.
Youth Legislator Boulware.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Greenstein.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Keene.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Lara.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Makababad.
Youth Legislator Thurgood.
Youth Legislator Miller.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Would like to cast my vote for Youth Legislator Thurgood.
Youth Legislator Roggist. Youth Legislator Sutton.
Youth Legislator Moss, please.
Youth Legislator Thornton.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Thurgood.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Walker.
Youth Legislator Moss.
Youth Legislator Wong.
Youth Legislator Moss.
And that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Aguayo. Youth Legislator Moss is appointed to consult with the NASC on behalf of the Youth Legislature. Congratulations. Since Youth Legislator Moss will be consulting with the NASC on our behalf, we should provide some guidance on the qualities we consider most important in selecting a nominee. For instance, do we want to emphasize leadership experience, academic achievements, or something else entirely? I'll now open the meeting up for discussion on that point. Do any youth legislators have comments for Youth Legislator Moss? Doesn't seem like it. Since we have no comments, I'm sure we can trust you, Youth Legislator Moss, to appoint a good representative for our board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Of course. I will now open the second period of public comment. The same rules mentioned during the first period of public comment apply. Please try to avoid repeating testimony if someone has already made your point, and each person will be asked to limit testimony to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment in Las Vegas? Doesn't look like it. We don't have any in the north. BPS, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. As it seems that we do not have any public comment, we are now ready to adjourn. Do any members have any final thoughts or comments before adjourning? Yeah.
Youth Legislator Greenstein, for the record.
Go ahead, Youth Legislator Greenstein.
I just want to congratulate Youth Legislator Thornton for her work on this BDR, and I also want to congratulate the entire Youth Legislature for selecting a final BDR.
Thank you, Youth Legislator Greenstein. I think we all share that sentiment. So with no other comments, this concludes our business for today. This meeting is now adjourned. We will continue with our training as soon as broadcast and production services is ready to proceed. Thank you.